All right. Thank you. It is 5:00 p.m. on Monday, December 5th, 2022, and I'm going to call this public hearing to order. This is a public hearing to discuss the 2023 budget, which has been put together over the last several months by department heads, town administration, town board. You've all had an opportunity to take a look at the budget book that has been put together by the town administration. And so really this is just to hear your comments, or if you have questions, we will try to answer them. And so please raise your hand if you have any questions or comments, and we'll just take them in order, and we'll try to allow 2-3 minutes if you would like per person. So any questions or comments on the 2023 budget? Wow. None, meeting adjourned. Cheryl?
I know we can't address specific finance. I know that we're talking about doing a technology investment into the town hall to allow Zoom. But I just want to comment that the taxpayers of this town spent enormous amounts of money on the ESB building, and it goes very underutilized. And so investing technology here, I don't know why we couldn't use the ESB building a little more for how nice it is and what it's used for.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the budget? Okay. Robin?
Yeah, I read this on Saturday. It seems like the $135,000 for the police is, Ashland County says they're not gonna pay it. We think they owe it, and you're in legal discussion right now?
Yeah, and we can, I mean, that is part of the budget, obviously, and we're gonna talk more about that during that section of the town meeting. But, yeah, without going through the whole history of what happened with Ashland County, they're not going to be providing a rebate of our property taxes for use of police coverage. You know, they are, as the county, they're responsible for coverage throughout the county in unincorporated areas, particularly like ours. And for decades, they've been paying for coverage here, not all of it. It's been kind of a cost sharing, but you know, the taxpayers here have been paying for all the coverage, either through the taxes you send to Ashland County or the taxes you send here. And now they want part of the taxes that you're sending to Ashland County that they used to send here not being sent here anymore. We have gone back and forth with the Department of Revenue. Initially, they agreed with us. Then Ashland County objected. Then they agreed with Ashland County. We are now dealing with our attorney, and they're going to be pursuing an appeal through them. We are also going to be looking at other avenues of recourse with Ashland County. And yeah, we're definitely not letting this, we're not letting this fall by the wayside. Any other questions? And we will go into a lot more detail on that. Law enforcement, Mike?
Well, is this where we talk about whether, I mean, the next meeting is to approve the levy or not approve it, or is this where we discuss whether you think it should be approved, or?
No, this is just the budget. The town meeting will be immediately, like, seconds after this meeting. And at that meeting, we will be talking about the tax levy. So right now, there's no action for anyone to take at this public hearing. This is just a public airing, if you will, of the budget to ask questions. The next meeting is actually the official town meeting, and that is where we will have a binding vote by electors, people who are eligible to vote here. And that will be, as a town, we self-assess really our property taxes. We vote on the property taxes we're going to be levying, which is really kind of unique. It doesn't happen in cities or villages or counties, but we do. So that's going to be the next meeting where we're going to talk about that. And then as part of that town meeting, after we vote on the levy, we're going to talk about the law enforcement coverage and whether that should be, as the budget currently provides, because we don't have that $135,000 from the county. The budget provides that with the money that we do have, we can provide 75% coverage locally with our local police department. And we would then be counting on the county to do their legally obligated service and provide the other 25%. Now I do know, and Michael, I didn't listen to that whole county board meeting, but there was some talk, I gather, that they thought that they would use Bayfield County to respond to calls here.
Somebody did say that, yes.
Okay, someone on the board of
Someone
supervisors.
on the county board of supervisors did say that. Maybe Mike can identify who it was. It's hard to tell sometimes who was speaking because they didn't identify themselves. Probably purposely.
Bill?
Just on that, my comment on asking Bayfield County to come over, if Ashland County thinks that they're gonna get out of their financial responsibility, Bayfield County will be giving them a bill for mutual aid.
Okay. Okay.
Huzzah, huzzah.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to point that out. I don't think none of those, people that are sat on the county board realize that they're gonna get a bill from Bayfield County.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, any other questions on the budget? Mary?
So the proposed budget on page 16 for law enforcement of 286,442 is at 75% coverage for 2023.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, Robin?
I was just gonna say that the report was laid out nicely, it's easy to read and.
Thank you. Thank you. I think credit for that goes to Michael Kupta and the staff of the town hall, so thank you for that. Any other questions? Debbie?
So I'm wondering if we have to discuss, if we need to discuss if that if we're going to rely on Ashland County for the 1/4 of that service to be provided by their sending a sheriff over here or through Bayfield County, versus our paying for that. That would affect any decision about the tax levy at this point. If we said temporarily, we want to cover 100% of our police force to make sure that we have service 100% of the time.
Yeah, at this point, we cannot add that amount to the
Okay.
tax levy. Okay, at this point, now, next year we could. So when we have this town meeting, and hopefully it'll be just electors who will raise their hand, when I ask, okay, who wants to borrow $135,000 to provide that extra 25% coverage locally, that'll be an indication to this board that next year, when we draft the levy, if there's an overwhelming, yes, let's borrow the money, and the town board says, yes, let's borrow the money, and we borrow the money, we're still gonna fight Ashland County tooth and nail over it, but, we're gonna protect our people. If that is the answer, then I think that we'll take that to mean that next year, put it on the levy, okay? We're not gonna keep borrowing year after year after year after year to cover that, if that's the will of the board and the will of the electorate. Mike?
So if we were to, for instance, vote to not to increase the levy to up 5% and stay with what the state says is our allowable levy,
Mhm.
the town board still has the ability to borrow money throughout the year to fill in any deficit that comes up.
Yeah, the town board statutorily has the ability to borrow money without the
Without
electorate's
our
approval. And so that's whether it's for the law enforcement or for what's already baked into the budget, which is a 5% above the state's calculated levy limit. Again, that's something that the electors of the town can override the state's calculated limit on their own. Marty?
Forgive me for being a little facetious on this. So 135,000 is the number that, or what it is what we can reduce the levy currently. But if we were to say, for instance, we're going to make our police budget 300,000 next year, we could reduce our levy by 300,000? No.
No.
Okay. So there's a limit to what we can basically take off our levy limit regarding police budget, or regarding non-reinforcement for the law enforcement.
Yeah, right now, our levy over the last several years has been enough to provide 3/4 of coverage, okay? We've gotten the other quarter of coverage, not from our levy ourselves on the town, but we've gotten it from the county, from their share of the tax levy.
Okay.
Now they're saying, we're not gonna give you that 1/4 from our share of the tax levy. You guys, if you want it, you pay for the whole thing. So, any other questions on the budget, Michael?
If I can clarify, so right now, as you probably know, the county levies about, for 2023, about $1.8 million from the town. Of that money, the last few years, they've been giving 135,000 of what we send over back to us. This year, they're not doing that. So that's what Glenn is talking about. It was about 1/3 of our police budget. We've been able to adjust scheduling and those kind of things so that it turns out to be, we can cover 3/4 of the shifts, they would cover the other quarter. But at this point, they are not refunding the money that we've been sending to them as they have done for the past several years.
May I follow up? How much of the 1.8 million do we see back in any service?
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, so they pay us to maintain County H. So Ben, what is that, about 35,000 a year, somewhere in there? Our zoning administrator works 20 hours a week, essentially 5 hours a week as deputy zoning administrator for Ashland County. So they send us $3,000 to cover his salary. We send them, last year, about $15,000 in permit fees. So I don't know how you want to do that math, but we get about $35,000 to $40,000 in direct services, I would say. I mean, the health department inspects all the short-term rental, so I mean, there's some personnel costs that they incur. They came over.
Charge an arm and a leg for the permit.
Well, yeah, but we're part of that too. I mean, they came over and did a vaccination clinic this year. And, I'm trying to be upfront. I'm very partisan on this issue, but trying to be just very upfront and straight about it. That's all I can tell you that we get back from Ashland County. I'm sure there are other services that we get indirectly, but I can't identify what they are, and they've not really identified them to us. We've asked, what do we get for our money? And they talk about, oh, you got County H. which the state paid for. So, you know, it's things like that. That's the best answer I can give you, Susan.
Well, that's the best question we can put back to the county.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, they also, you know, the county treasurer, what you don't pay in January to Carol, you have to pay to the county treasurer directly in July. Okay, so they're doing that, the county clerk, you know, if you get married or whatever, divorced, I guess. They print the ballots for our elections, you know, that sort of thing, you know. So, oh, we get billed directly from that.
They house our.
They print the tax bills, okay, they hold our prisoners, all, you know, however many we've ever had. Okay, so any other questions on the budget, Mike?
But this, to clarify, when we go to the next session, we only have the ability to either approve the recommended increased levy or decline and keep it with the state mandated levy.
And actually, there's a third option, Michaela has pointed out. The electors can vote anything below the state
The
limit.
state, so we
Okay.
can either vote for the state levy or less,
You could vote for 0,
0.
okay, and then we just turn off the lights and
But
everyone goes home.
we can't, so either we go for the 5% or the, what is the
The
state?
state or lower, but nothing in between.
Nothing in
Not
between.
1%, not 2%.
Okay, and then,
Or,
still to be clear, the town board still has the ability, without the elector's permission, throughout the year to go and borrow money if it needs it for something.
Mhm.
Okay, I mean, that's just, so we don't approve the borrowing, we just approve either the state levy or the 5%.
absolutely, and when we get to that, we will
Okay,
talk
no,
about
that's
that.
what you
Yeah,
got, okay.
okay, any other questions on Dale?
Just, also to be clear, this budget is based on the 5% increase?
This is it 5 or 5.3? Yeah, and it doesn't, so this budget does not include what would need to be increased to include 100% coverage of police.
But
Okay,
it makes the assumption, it is based on the state limit levy.
Plus
plus 5%. So it's 5%, it's roughly 5% over the state levy limit and an allowable limit. And it's 5.3% above last year's number. So, okay, any other questions on the budget? Any other comments on the budget? Going once? Going twice? Honey?
Do you have any idea how much that budget increase is reflecting the general inflation out in the whole economy?
Well, I can tell you, so the 5% increase is about,
Well, I don't know that that's your question.
yeah, I think that probably, I mean, just we're probably not raising the levy by as much as we would if we were raising it by the total increase in inflation that we've had. And so, I mean, to be quite honest with everyone, my expectation would be, we're probably gonna be here a year from now saying, we're gonna need to raise the levy again. Because we're not raising it by as much as I think we need to this year. So, thank you. Any other comments or questions on the budget? Going once, going twice? Taylor, do we need to?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Moved and seconded to adjourn, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries, meeting is adjourned. We are now moving into our special town meeting, which I will call to order, on Monday, December 5th. And the first thing is to consider the adoption of a resolution by the town meeting endorsing the town board resolution 2022-1117, which proposes that the town levy exceed the state allowable levy limit by the 5%, which would be an increase of $89,114 for a total levy of $1,871,395. And I will ask for a motion to that effect. Is there a motion to approve that resolution?
Mike.
Yes, Mike?
Did Is it all of us? Or-
Yeah, any elector
Oh,
can
okay.
move.
I'll make a motion, we stay with the state mandated levy of 0.5% or 0.3%.
The state allowed us your,
The allowable levy
without
without the increase. That's my motion.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Steve.
Steve? Any discussion? I think this would be a mistake. And, Michael?
I'm not sure I understand this correctly, but that will fundamentally take away any inflation protection to our employees. It's in the budget.
Well,
Now it's up to the board when they.
yeah, I mean, basically, we'd have to borrow money to give a raise. Yeah,
So we have to borrow money to give our employees inflation support.
yes,
And borrowing isn't cheap.
and borrowing's not cheap.
Okay, the town board can decide to borrow money if and when they run out of the funds from the tax levy. Because there's projects that may or may not happen. And if we need money to borrow it, then we may or may not get funding for the police. There's all of these questions.
Mike, if you were to follow that logic, we would say, let's have a levy of 0, and we'll just borrow what we need.
And my logic is to stay with the state, we only get two choices, and that is the
So you
state.
could go with 0.
Okay, I'd stay, my motion was to stay with the state mandated levy.
Dale?
I would recommend, or I would oppose the motion,
Okay.
because we just passed we just looked at a well-disciplined budget that was based on the state levy plus the 5%. It doesn't cover our total costs. We anticipate another one next year. If we borrow money, we have to service the debt eventually. So I'd prefer not to, I would prefer that the board not be put in a position to borrow money.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, is there a vote on, all in favor of the motion?
So the motion is to not approve the resolution and to go with the state allowable limit. I'm gonna ask for hands raised and not actual ayes, if that's okay, so.
Okay, all in favor of Mike Stark and Steve Lennox's motion, raise your hand. 3 in favor, all opposed?
Is it okay if I have -3 after the sign-in sheet?
Motion fails.
Anybody abstain?
Any abstentions? Thank you, Amy. Okay, motion fails. Is there another motion? Robin?
Do I have to read it again? Number 2, consider you could just say motion to approve with the 5% increase.
Motion to approve with a 5% increase.
Second.
Who was the second?
Dale, whatever. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. Okay,
Is it all but 3?
Yeah.
I think so.
opposed? 3 opposed, okay. Thank you. And then, Michaela, I guess we have to also then, so this is it's kind of unusual under Wisconsin law. You first have to approve going over the levy as a separate motion from approving the levy. So we've approved to go over the levy, now we have to approve the levy itself.
So it's the same number that's in number 2 though at the last sentence.
It's $1,871,395. So we're looking for a motion to approve the 2022 total town tax levy of $1,871,395 pursuant to section 60.101A Wisconsin statutes.
I so move.
Pete Ross,
Pete Ross.
is there a second? Debbie Knopf,
Thank you.
okay, any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Okay,
Most, I'm guessing.
all, I think we've got everyone, but everyone voted yes. Okay, opposed? Okay, motion carries, thank you. Okay, next item. La Pointe Police Department budget, staffing and funding. So I think everyone has heard a fair amount on this. If we would like to have more discussion, but what and I think the board is really looking for, speak up if you're looking for something else, is, and this is very much informal, not binding. Again, the board will, after this meeting, we will have a next, like immediately, a town board meeting to approve the actual budget. And at that meeting, the town board has the authority to amend the budget that you've seen so far. We can't amend the levy, that's now locked, okay, you've set that. But we could amend the budget and we could increase the budget and find another way to raise the money from increasing the budget, such as borrowing. Or we can leave the budget as is, and that's particularly with respect to the law enforcement.
Or
So-
decrease it, there were a couple people asking us to stop the police department.
Yes, or we could decrease it, we could eliminate the police department and, we could figure out what to do, we could reduce the levy. I'm gonna call on people, Debbie, you were first.
Yes, I'm curious if you can update us into what legal counsel, have you had a chance to discuss with our legal counsel, how they're perceiving this, fight that we want, our desire to challenge Nelson County for the $135,000.
Well, I'll tell you what I know, and then I'll ask Michael to add anything. Well, first of all, our normal legal counsel, the person who handles our traffic tickets and our normal stuff, is also legal counsel for Ashland County. Okay, so they've got a conflict of interest and they probably can't represent either one of us. And so we had done this before this came up, because of some other, basically our legal counsel is just overloaded with work and hasn't been as responsive as we'd like, so we found supplemental legal counsel who we've been using now, talking to about this Ashland County issue. The conversation that I'm aware of, they think that we do have a good case. We're preparing an appeal of the Department of Revenue's reversal of their position. But if I'm not misquoting him, he feels that we also have a good claim, forgetting about the Department of Revenue, under the Wisconsin Constitution. And that is provisions in the Wisconsin Constitution that basically prohibit an entity like Ashland County from treating an entity like the town of LaPointe like a remote colony. And so we are going to be pursuing that. Michael, do you have anything further to add?
Just, I guess, a little clarification. So we will be filing for a determination with the Department of Revenue over statutory language. There's statute under counties and there's statute under towns that is essentially parallel language that says when one governmental entity transfers responsibility for a service to another governmental entity, the levy that supports that service also gets transferred. And so that was what the Department of Revenue originally told us, that the $135,000, since Ashland County is not going to refund that to us, would come off the levy that town taxpayers paid to the town, or to pay to the county, and instead it would go on the town's levy. It would be no impact at all in the grand scheme of things on you as individual taxpayers, but the money would stay with the town instead of going through the middleman of the county. And then 3 weeks later, the Department of Revenue reversed itself. So we will be appealing that reversal. And the attorney believes the language is what it is, and a service is a service, whether it's provided directly or paid for. And so that will be the fundamentals of our argument, is that there's no distinction. The service is being provided. Otherwise, you know, if you hire a contractor to build a road, are you saying the county is not paying for the road and not providing that road? So, you know, it's that kind of parallel we're going to be making. And then, as Glenn mentioned, then there's the larger issue. You know, I mentioned earlier that we, as LaPointe taxpayers, are levied for calendar year 2023 roughly about $380,000 for the sheriff's department for services that we do not receive.
Yeah.
So, you know, so at this point, that would be the claim as to, you know, whether they can legally do that. And so we're at this point approaching it on two fronts. I mean, we've attempted to negotiate face-to-face with the county, that was unsuccessful. So we don't really have many options if we want to try to maintain our ability to support 24/7 police coverage on our own. And, you know, as other people have pointed out, get something back from the county for the tax money we send to them.
And I think the point is also, regardless of whether the town board decides that we're gonna, or the townspeople ask us, to cover the 100% or not cover the 100% by borrowing this year, we're gonna fight. I mean, it's not like if we're gonna borrow the money, we're gonna not fight anymore. I mean, we're gonna fight regardless of it, Mike.
Okay, I got an update as late as this afternoon, and I've been talking to Michael on it. And the county administrator wants to meet with the town, on, right after the 3rd of January, because the new sheriff is in effect as of January 3rd. He's just elected and he's not currently the sheriff. He will be as of January 3rd. He wants to sit down and discuss this exact issue of how much they will give us in, to cover what they would be doing for us.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
Actually, what Mike said, actually addresses the topic, which is, we've been talking about 75%, 25% as if a percent is equal, and they're really not. If you're off island, if you're on the mainland, there's a diminution of service. It's just not gonna happen the way it would. So has anyone been able to sort of measure the actual consequence of, all right, we're not gonna get 25%. What does that mean in terms of actual police presence? What aren't we getting?
Michael?
Well, so Chief Defoe and I have been working a lot on different scheduling options. And so when, in the budget that the board is considering, when we say we are covering 75% with our police department, it essentially means we will cover 5 days and the county will cover 2 days. And we will have 24/7 coverage on the island with our police department. We at this point have 2 full-time officers and 2 regular part-time officers. Full-time officers will work somewhere between 40 and 43 hours a week. The part-time officers will work somewhere in the range of 20 hours a week. So they will be here around the clock for 5 days. And then the other, 5 days, that may not mean literally 5 days, but equivalent of 5 days. And then we would be relying on Ashland County Sheriff's deputies to be the primary response agency for the other 2 days. And so what that means, of course, we all understand the distance, even when the ferry is running, and the difficulty of when the ferry is not running. Now, we have broached with the sheriff and the county administrator previously that they're not prepared at this point. So we don't know if they're gonna put a car on the island or not. We don't know if they're gonna, well, they've told us they're not gonna station someone on the island, but they may have to have someone sleep over. They've not made that proposal. Those of us who understand the logistics can't figure out how they would do it otherwise. So to try to address your question, that's the best we know at this point. Until we know what the town board actually approves, we have not had any further discussions with the sheriff's department to work out those kind of logistics. And so we'll know more after tonight. And Mike, Dan Grady has my phone number, he can call me.
Okay, but they said they wanted to meet, right after January.
He can call me.
Oh, he can call.
Point of order.
Information on what they've said.
Point of order,
Yes?
the administrator can call the administrator.
Yes. Okay, any other, yes?
Could you just summarize for me in layman's terms, a longstanding agreement that we had, what the breakdown of the reason that they gave for discontinuing
Oh, they're broke.
In layman's- Except for our best layman's terms right there.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah, we're helping them balance their budget.
Now, you know, yes, I would not want to be on their county board. They have problems that, you know, frankly, and this is no way for them to go about trying to fix it.
Right.
Because honestly, the only way out of their problem is by, see, unlike us, where you guys could say, yeah, let's raise the levy, the only way they can raise their levy is by having a countywide referendum, okay? And they tried that about a year and a half ago, and it failed 60% to 40%. Now, at that time, the second highest municipality in favor of the referendum was the town of La Pointe, okay? We voted 48% in favor of their referendum. The city of Ashland was the only other higher one, and that was 52%. So, you know, they're, you know, if they're gonna get a levy increase passed, they're not going about it the right way. So, Dale?
Having said that, I strongly support your fight. And the reason for that is that we need an accounting of the value that they provide to us in balance of, you know, to the earlier question, the value for the revenue we provide to them. And it feels like an act of bad faith, the way that this happened. And if they're successful, it's a terrible precedent, I think, not just us, but other, you know, net positive taxpayers.
Yeah.
So I hope that in our arguments, we get a full accounting of value that they provide back to us.
Thank you, Dale. Marty, I think you were next.
Is there any discussion regarding Ashland County absolving the town of La Pointe of liability? God forbid something should happen while one of their officers are not here on duty?
Good question.
Well, Bill,
As of right now, townships are not required to actually have a police department. Okay, that's state statute. Cities and counties are, villages and towns do not. The responsibility, if we're not here, falls solely on the Ashland County Sheriff's Department.
so there you go. Robin?
Well, and I attended that meeting at the fire hall,
Yes.
and there was a man in the back who was familiar with police work, and he said that there's no time frame. They said they don't have to respond in 5 hours, you know, so I mean, they can respond maybe 3 days later, and
Which isn't gonna help you a lot if you've locked your keys in your car.
But my other question was, when you say 2 days out of 7 that won't be covered, are you thinking, you're like looking at maybe the middle of the night or the,
So we're talking about 2 24-hour days.
okay, so you're not talking partial day coverage, you're talking like
No.
Monday, Tuesday, like which comes mode.
Okay, Mary?
Well, just along those lines, I mean, I would think you'd go 7 days a week with the town of La Pointe from May to October, and then have, you know, maybe 4 days a week during the quote-unquote off-season. I mean, we're not talking about July having Ashland County have to get over here.
No, and I think, you know, now you're getting into some police,
Well,
you know,
and I'm sure it's all on
coverage issues.
APT, and that's fine,
Yeah.
but I mean,
That's what we came for. But, yeah. Good point. Michael?
You know, former police chief Mike Anderson can give you details, but Ashland County used to station a deputy here. So it's not like it's never been done. And those are things that we would have to work out if we wind up relying on them for law enforcement coverage. And so those would be the kind of things that when we sit down with the new sheriff, we would have to work those logistics out.
Marty?
Would our position change any if we incorporated rather than say the village?
No, I mean, I think, well, we're a town, we're not a village.
Okay.
And
We'd have to be a city in order
Yeah,
to have our position change.
And the way it would change would be that we would then be required to have a police department instead of right now, we're not required. Okay. So, all right, Michael Collins?
Just to follow up on that same observation about the mainland and on-island police presence are not the same thing. Have the people who really know what they're talking about, and I assume there's some folks in the room, in the police department that can answer this question, but it seems to me that a 25% reduction, not of money, but of coverage, is a massive vulnerability. And there may be all kinds of ways to address it financially, but until that is clearly understood, my hunch is we shouldn't be playing games with that exposure, that we need to have a solution for that and then figure out how to fund it. But absent that, I think it's pretty scary. And whatever they're talking about from the sheriff's perspective about coverage is, frankly, for me, meaningless.
Thank you.
I wanna make sure I
Cindy?
understand that, can I get clarification?
Go ahead, Ann.
So are you saying that we need to know the details of what the coverage would look like before we approve or deny spending for it?
No, not necessarily. I just didn't want to walk out of this room and have it understood that, nah, we're willing to go with 25% less. And we'll solve it down the road. I think we need to either solve it now and get it refixed in a week or 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, but we need to be certain among ourselves that we have that kind of coverage and we don't have that kind of exposure. 25% reduction is a big deal.
Cindy?
I just wanna emphasize that as the ambulance director, not knowing if I have a police behind me.
Right.
I can't tell you what time of the day or night I'm gonna have a call. I can't tell you the severity, but I can tell you one thing, I rely on the police to be there to assist us in finding places, getting the dog put away in a safe place, making sure there aren't any guns in the room. If it's a domestic, I'm not comfortable sending my crew in to do it. The first thing we learn as EMTs, the scene is safe. And who clears the scene? The police force clears the scene. That is not my job. And it's not my job to send my crew in for that kind of liability. And it makes me, this whole conversation is making me shake. I'm so nervous about it. So I'm just trying to emphasize.
Well, and that was my next question. I was speaking with a friend in Bayfield yesterday, and she emphasized, I was talking about this meeting, and she emphasized as an EMT, longtime EMT, what goes on when they get support. And she said some of the calls that she's had, if there hadn't been police support for those calls, she wouldn't have made them. And it made me think immediately about our EMTs and what effect this would have on them and their willingness to be an EMT, since we don't have enough of them anyway, and how much we value them. So that was my second follow-up. Thank you, Cynthia, for what you're doing, is how it affects them.
Rick?
Well, I'm gonna back up Cindy on that because that 25% and the word worry, I mean, you don't know what's gonna happen. And you can't just not worry 25% of the time.
Yeah.
Same thing with the fire department, if we get to a bad call, it's like something, really bad went down that we shouldn't be dabbling with, we call it law enforcement, we rely on it. And I listened to that county meeting, and I'm just bringing back up the part where they asked if Bayfield could be called. We don't pay our taxes to Bayfield, and they still have this big hurdle called a ferry to get on. So I am, as fire chief, I'm pretty nervous about that 25% lack of coverage.
Okay.
Plus Bayfield County, I believe, is a larger piece of property, and they've got towns even further south than Butter.
Yep, they do. Paul?
Maybe we should pay our taxes in Bayfield County.
Has anybody thought about putting
Michael?
I think what you said, you were gonna ask an informal poll of the community to see if they supported 100% coverage or were willing to go to 75. Is that the fundamental question?
So I would like to ask that question now, if I could get a show of hands of people who would like.
With the caveat that to get to 100%, we have to borrow 135,000.
Yes, most likely. Yes,
Can I
yes.
read a
Directly
comment?
to us.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I have just a few comments of people who couldn't be present tonight. The first is Pete Rogers. I'll just summarize that, would like to borrow if it is necessary, long story short, as well as Jim Rogers says the same. would like to borrow if we can't have the coverage. Oh, Jim Rogers and Pete Rogers.
Okay, there we go.
And then
That's
the
what
third,
is your Roger.
the third one I'll actually read because it's a little more in-depth. This is from John Nielsen. If we continue to find a way to fund our own police department with 100% coverage, I will assure you the county will not be forced to find the means of providing the state-required protection services. Yes, this step may cause some short-term discomfort, but it is the only way to force the county to do what is required. To have the most amount of impact, we really should cancel the entire police department for 2023 and watch how fast Ashland will then react to avoid unpleasant forced actions by the state. Trust me, they will if this action is taken. As long as we have a police department, the county can use that as legal defense for not providing the services they are required to provide. Their officers can rent the overnight facilities of our new ESB and use our vehicles and equipment while on island. Combine that with a resident town constable or two and you will be fine. With the skyrocketing costs of compliance for training and equipment required by insurance companies to protect towns from liability, it is inevitable that there will come a time in the very near future where it is not feasible for small towns like us to have our own police department. Also, do you really expect the current police department staff to continue to stay on with cuts in their direct pay of about $20,000 per year? What would you do if your pay was cut this much? Use some of the police department money to install CCTV cameras to make ID, apprehension, and prosecution of lawbreakers easy. CCTV is a wonderful deterrent, but the bad guys know it is in place. Thank you for your consideration, John Nielsen.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any more, Mike?
I just want to reiterate that the county wants to sit down and discuss this. And so, so that's where they are.
Mike? Okay, Mike, if I can just say, this is almost a year old now.
Yeah.
Okay? The county, just so everyone knows, okay, the county, initially decided to do this, without, their finance committee voted to do this almost a year ago, shortly after we had this meeting where we voted on our budget, we voted on our levy, they voted on their levy, we relied on their budget that had the 135 in it. They then had their finance committee meeting and said, oh, we need $135,000 because we need to raise the pay of the jailers because we can't get jailers. And now they've just done their budget. And they didn't tell us it was gonna be up for the, Mike, I've got the floor. They didn't tell us that that was going to be on the agenda. They didn't tell us that that was going to be something they were going to do. They just did it. Well, then we went and talked to the county board and they said, oh, let's push this back, let's have them negotiate. You know what? We had one meeting and they said, we'll get back to you. They never got back to us. I don't trust Dan Grady as far as I can see him. Mike, let's let someone else have the floor, Bill.
I just want to point out, we've been trying to get to the table with them, and they would not come to the table with us. To say that they want to come to the table now is now too late. I'm sorry. It's now time for a fight.
Okay, I would like to see a show of hands of people who would like.
Glenn, I have a question.
Peggy, go ahead.
I have a question, because I just want to make sure that, so if we vote to fund it 100%, and you're still gonna pursue it with the county, with the whole legal part, if the town wins the legal part, will that then go back that the county must provide that funding to us moving here on out?
Yes, I mean, I think our point in that is, when we win that fight, it's a fight that will go forever.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be what the statutes are. And so before we take a show of hands, I would like to just clarify, this is strictly advisory. The vote on the budget will be up to the 5 people sitting around the table that you elected. And we will take that on ourselves, but we do want to know what this group of electors who took the time out tonight on a cold winter night to come out and express their opinion. And so with that in mind, I would like to see, unless there's any more comment, a show of hands of who would like to see the town continue with the 100% coverage we've had, even if that means borrowing money. Okay,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 20, 21, 22, 23.
Okay, who would not like to do that?
1, 2, 3, 4, and some people aren't voting. 5.
6. And abstaining?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any further comment? Mike?
Okay, is the town board willing to sit down with the county to try and negotiate something? Even though they haven't in the past, if they say they will right now because they're a new sheriff, that's elected, go ahead, the town board, sit down and not.
He can call our town administrator.
I mean, this is a public meeting.
He can call our town administrator, Mike.
And then will the town board sit down?
He can call our town administrator to make an appointment with the town board.
And the town board is willing to do it.
I think
I'm your representative at the county, I've gotta know whether you'll do it or not.
Well, we
No, you don't.
called the county board.
I know, and they haven't in the past,
Let's
but
see
now
if
they
they
have.
follow through, Mike. Let's see if they actually follow through to call the town administrator to make an appointment with the town board.
Okay,
Otherwise, they can just be
right,
quiet.
okay, but if they do, just want everybody to know that they talk.
Thank you. Michael?
I just wanna, Paul raised the question of seceding from Ashland County. I mean, we've actually looked into that. It would take a legislative act to do that. Doesn't mean we can't pursue it, but it's really an uphill struggle.
Yes.
Just so you know.
Go ahead.
If we are part of Ashland County, we're part of some other county, and so it's just a matter of who we're paying. Yeah, whether it be Ashland or Bayfield or Douglas, I mean, we will be part of another county.
Ashland County, Bayfield County is more around Marty?
But we do have a historical precedent with LaPointe County as being its own independent, unique, and distinct entity, history rules. Huzzah!
Thank you, Marty, for that history lesson.
Thank you.
There will be much more said on this. Is there a motion to adjourn the town meeting?
I make a second.
Steve moved and Michael Collins seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And now.
Thank you.